Today's Pledge of Allegiance is by Aiden Ratliff, Jesse Ratliff, and Mackenzie Hinckley from Prairie View High School in Henderson, Colorado. And they are guests of Representative Michelson Janae.
Please join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's awesome.
Please call the roll.
Good job.
Representatives Arndt. Representative Arndt.
Excuse.
Becker J. Becker K. K. Becker.
Excuse.
Beckman. Benavides. Bridges. Representative Bridges. Representative Arndt is present.
Excuse.
Buck. Buckner. Carver. Catlin. Coleman. Covarrubias. Danielson. Escar. Everett. Exum. Foote. Garnett. Janal. Gray. Hamner. Hanson. Harrod. Bruton. Humphrey. Jackson. Kennedy. Kennedy. Kraft Tharp. Kraft Tharp.
Excuse.
Representative Kraft Tharp is present. Representative Bridges is present. Representative Becker K is present. Landgraf. Landgraf.
Representative Landgraf excused.
Lawrence. Lebsock. Lee. Leonard. Lewis, excused. Liston. Lontine. Lundeen. McKean. McLaughlin. Melton. Michelson Janae. Mitch Bush. Representative Arndt is present. Navarro. Neville. Nordberg. Pabon. Pedersen. Pedersen.
Excused.
Rankin. Ransom. Rosenthal. Representative Landgraf is present. Sane. Salazar. Representative Pedersen is present. Salazar. Representative Becker J is present. Sias. Representative Salazar excused. Sias. Singer. Thurlow. Valdez. Van Winkle. Weissman. Willett. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Winter.
Excused.
Oh. The winner is present. Wist. Young. Madam Speaker.
Present. With 64 present and 1 excuse, we have a quorum. Representative Michelson, Janae.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I owe you an apology. Over the last several weeks, we've had wonderful poems and limericks to announce this, and I gotta say, I was a little busy, so maybe I'll have time for a poem tomorrow. But today, Madam Speaker, I move that the reading of the Journal of Friday, April 21st, 2017 be dispensed with and approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Members, you have heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying no. The motion passes. All right, announcements and introductions. Representative Arndt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, a lot of us are down here today to honor the Family Leadership Training Institute, and it's a first of its kind family civics program that helps participants develop skills needed to become effective leaders in their communities. Once recruited and accepted, participants spend 120 hours attending 20-week curriculum that integrates personal development, leadership training, civic literacy, and civic participation skills. They also participate in projects that make significant impact in their communities. The members of the Colorado House of Representatives are proud to recognize the Family Leadership Training Institute and applaud their efforts in developing effective leaders in our state, and it's all done through Colorado State University Extension Services. They're all here today. Please welcome and thank them for their work, and thank them for being civic leaders.
Thank you for your service to Colorado. Further announcements or introductions, Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to welcome our doctor of the day today from Durango, Colorado, Dr. Buzz Bricka. You stand up? Yay! Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McLaughlin, that'll be a $1 fine. Assistant Minority Leader, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, if I could have your attention, please. They may live in Representative Hamner's district, but I'm honored this morning to introduce you to my two most important constituents, my parents, Ron and Frankie West from Paonia. You stand?
Hello, welcome to the Capitol.
And also with us is my wife, Susan. So welcome, Mom and Dad and Susan.
Further announcements or introductions, Representative Navarro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If you would help me introduce Esther Williamson, a student from Honey Elementary School in Los Animas County. She is the 2017 Colorado Tree Coalition 5th grade poster winner. And with her today is her family and her teacher, Mr. Martinez. If we could give them a round of applause and welcome and congratulations.
Congratulations. Further announcements or introductions? Any further announcements or introductions? Seeing no further announcements or introductions, our next order of business is third reading of bills. Members, we are going to third reading. Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to lay over House Bills 1237, 1286, 1318, 256, and 262 till tomorrow, Tuesday, April 25th.
Seeing no objection, those bills will be laid over. That brings us to House Bill 1332. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1332.
House Bill 1332 by Representatives Bridges and Wilson, House Senators Spanberg and Smallwood, concerning State Board of Education authorization for alternative teacher license for a person who participates in an alternative teacher program provided by a designated agency working within a non-public early child care facility.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1332 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of House Bill 1332 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 63 yes votes, 1 no vote, House Bill 1332 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1292.
House Bill 1292 by Representative Young, House Senator Lumber, concerning child welfare license out-of-home placement provider rates and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1292 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of House Bill 1292 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Lundin, please close the machine. With 47 yes votes, 17 no votes, 1 excuse, House Bill 1292 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1337.
House Bill 1337 by Representative Hamner, House Senator Moreno, concerning the authority of the Department of Revenue to establish renewal application fee for each liquor license that the department issues.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1337 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of House Bill 1337 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 38 yes votes, 26 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1337 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1330.
House Bill 1330 by Representatives Lee and Wist, House Senators Fields and Cook, concerning disallowing the use of certain convictions for the purpose of adjudicating a person a habitual criminal.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1330 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of House Bill 1330 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 64 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1330 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Ms. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1260.
House Bill 1260 by Representative Kennedy L. Senator Finberg, concerning the establishment of contribution limits under the Fair Campaign Practices Act for candidates for county offices in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1260 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of House Bill 1260 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 37 yes votes, 27 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1260 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1310.
House Bill 1310 by Representatives Kennedy and Jackson, House Senator Finberg, concerning an application screening fee that a residential landlord charges a prospective tenant.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1310 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of House Bill 1310 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 37 yes votes, 27 no votes, 1 excuse, House Bill 1310 is passed. Co-sponsors. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1279.
House Bill 1279 by Representatives Garnett and St. House Senators Tate and Guzman, concerning the requirement that the Unit Owners Association obtain approval through a vote of unit owners before filing a construction defect action.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1279 on third reading and final passage.
Wasn't sure if we were going to get here, but with that, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. With that, please close the machine. With 64 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 1 excuse, and incredible leadership from both chambers, House Bill 1279 is passed. Co-sponsors. 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 Oh, we still have some resistors. With that, please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1305.
House Bill 1305 by Representatives Foot and Melton, House Senator Guzman, concerning the timing of an inquiry into a job applicant's criminal history.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1305 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of House Bill 1305 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 36 yes votes, 28 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1305 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1252.
House Bill 1252 by Representative Donald Senator Hill, concerning the collection of court costs from persons who are convicted of criminal offenses.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1252 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of House Bill 1252 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 64 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1252 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1291.
House Bill 1291 by Representatives Art and Becker J. House Senator Quorum, concerning the ability to store water in alternate place of storage if alternate place of storage of the historical consumptive use of the water right has already been quantified in a previous change of the water right.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1291 on third reading and final passage.
Members, you have heard the motion to pass House Bill 1291 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Benavides and Representative Herod. Please close the machine. With 64 yes votes and 0 no votes, 1 excuse, House Bill 1291 is passed. Co-sponsors. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1300.
House Bill 1300 by Representative Benavides, also Senator Moreno, concerning requirement that contracts for public projects over $500,000 that are not funded using federal monies use apprentices for the parts of the project that are performed by workers in their principal occupation.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1300 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of 1300 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 37 yes votes, 27 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1300 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill 117.
Senate Bill 117 by Senator Cornwell, also Representative Catlin and Valdez, concerning confirmation that industrial hemp is a recognized agricultural product for which a person with a water right decreed for agricultural use may use the water subject to the water right for industrial hemp cultivation.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 117 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of Senate Bill 117 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please vote. Please close the machine. With 64 yes votes, 0 no votes, Senate Bill 117 is passed on third reading and final passage. Co-sponsors. 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 Please close the machine. Nice job, Representative Catlin and Valdez. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill 268.
Senate Bill 268 by Senator Smallwood and Curls, Representative Ransom and General, concerning an increase in the number of pharmacy technicians and pharmacists being supervised.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 268 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of Senate Bill 268 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please vote. Please close the machine. With 64 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 268 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill 27.
Senate Bill 27 by Senator Cordell, Representative Melton, concerning an increase in the penalty for text messaging while operating a motor vehicle.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 27 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of Senate Bill 27 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please vote. Representative Pabon, please close the machine. With 56 yes votes, 8 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 27 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill 215.
Senate Bill 215 by Senator Priol, also Representative Gray, concerning the continuation of the Sunset Law of the Division of Real Estate and in connection therewith implementing the recommendations contained in the Sunset Report prepared by the Department of Regulatory Agencies.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 215 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of Senate Bill 215 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 54 yes votes, 10 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 215 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill 244.
Senate Bill 244 by Senator Priol, also Representative Gray, concerning retail food establishment license fees.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 244 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of Senate Bill 244 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Please close the machine. With 62 yes votes, 2 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 244 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill 132.
Senate Bill 132 by Senator Gardner, also Representatives Wist and Melton, concerning enactment of the revised uniform law on notarial acts as amended.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 132 on third reading and final passage.
All right, the question before us is a passage of Senate Bill 132 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. please close the machine. With 64 yes votes, 0 no votes, 1 excuse, Senate Bill 132 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to proceed out of order for consideration of House Joint Resolution 1028 and House Joint Resolution 1027.
Seeing no objection, we'll proceed out of order for the immediate consideration of HJR 1027 and HJR 1028. Ms. Randall, please read the title of HJR 1028.
House Joint Resolution 1028 by Representative Sane and Danielson, Senator Marble, concerning honoring Gold Star families.
Representative Sane.
Madam Speaker and members, I move for the adoption of House Joint Resolution 17-1028 and request that it be read at length.
Whereas, since the Revolutionary War, more than 1 million American soldiers have died in battle and military conflicts. Their families, who have endured these losses and the accompanying grief, are known as Gold Star families. And whereas named for the practice of families hanging service banners in the windows of their homes with a star for each family member in the armed forces, deep blue stars were displayed for each living member serving, and they were replaced with gold if their loved one lost his or her life serving our country and protecting our freedom. And whereas Grace Darling Siebold founded the American Gold Star Mothers in 1928, her son, George, was serving in World War I. And while he was abroad, she channeled her worry into visiting hospitalized veterans. When the letters from her son stopped arriving and she learned of his death, she took action in her grief and with a group of mothers established American Gold Star Mothers Incorporated. And whereas since 1936, Gold Star Mother's Day has been honored through presidential proclamation as the last Sunday of each September. And whereas the acts of heroism and the stories of courage of each fallen soldier are forever remembered in the minds and hearts of their families. And whereas while national monuments and memorials serve as strong visible reminders for the men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our nation, Gold Star families are a living legacy of each fallen soldier and can help us all remember and honor these heroes by name. And whereas long after the battles have ended, as our stars and stripes of liberty fly, the families who have at home a folded flag and an empty seat at the table deserve our respect and our support. Now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 71st General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, honor the pride and the pain of the parents and partners and children and siblings of our fallen heroes and recognize the families of these proud patriots with an expression of profound gratitude and respect.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem Danielson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you so much, colleagues. Please be seated. I'll keep it brief today. This is a really important resolution and one that we care a lot about. It's been really nice to work with Representative Sane. I just want to say a quick bit about the Gold Star families. When someone makes this sacrifice, it is the definition of heroism. And this is an organization that works to support these families across the state and across the country. And whether it's personal support in the time of loss or an understanding, sympathetic ear, or establishing a memorial or a foundation or something to recognize the service and sacrifice of their loved ones. Or, for example, the Fallen Heroes Memorial that I got to work with Representative Carver on this year in this very chamber. We were partnering with the Gold Star families and a number of other military service organizations. So what can you do? Why are we bringing the resolution today? To honor those in the chamber with us, of course, who Representative Sane will introduce, to honor the service of so many people across our state and their sacrifice. But you can actually take an additional step. If you are one who has lost a loved one in the service, get in touch with the Gold Star families. You'll know you're in the right place. If you haven't lost a loved one in the service, get in touch with the Gold Star families. You can go to their website and you can support events, scholarships, foundations, memorials, or even the simple gesture of connecting with them on Facebook to understand what's happening in your community on behalf of the veterans that served alongside us for so long and made that ultimate sacrifice. Thank you so much for your time today, colleagues, and I'll turn it over to Representative Sane.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, it is an honor to present this resolution to you today along with Representative Danielson, honoring the first among our American families, the Gold Star families, who have endured what only can be described as unmanageable to the rest of us. A dreaded knock at the door from a military casualty assistance officer to deliver the news that their son or daughter isn't coming home. These families have endured so America can endure. These Gold Star mothers here today are a national treasure. I would like to read in part a speech given in 2010 by Marine General John F. Kelly, now our Director of Homeland Security. General Kelly said, "Those with less than a sense of service to the nation never understand it when men and women of character step forward to look danger and adversity straight in the eye, refusing to blink, to give ground, even to their own deaths. The protected can't begin to understand the price paid so they and their families can sleep safe and free at night. No, they are not victims, but are warriors, your warriors, and warriors are never victims, regardless of how and where they fall. Death or fear of death has no power over them. Their paths are paved with sacrifice, sacrifices they gladly make for you. If anyone thinks you can somehow thank them for their service and not support the cause for which they fight, America's survival, then they are lying to themselves and rationalizing away something in their lives. But more importantly, they are slighting our warriors and mocking their commitment to the nation. General Kelly gave this remarkable and pointed speech 4 days after his 29-year-old son, Marine First Lieutenant Robert Michael Kelly, was killed instantly after stepping on a landmine while leading a patrol in southern Afghanistan. The men and women who gave their last breath in battle are the best of us. Their dedication to purpose and duty was more important than life itself. And their self-sacrifice not only made this nation possible, but possible to purchase freedom for another generation of Americans. And our Gold Star mothers and fathers have seeded their generational dream, a future with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, so the rest of us will not live in fear of that knock on the door. Gold Star families are the American cornerstone for our future, the bedrock of a nation, and we extend our heartfelt gratitude to you. Members, we are going to go ahead and pass this resolution and add co-sponsors and then speak further on the resolution. That way, this can get over to the Senate in a timely fashion.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is a passage of HJR 1028. All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying no. HJR 1028 is passed. Madam Speaker Pro Tem Danielson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that today's roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, today's roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Thank you, members. Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The families here today are honoring the memory of their heroes in the General Assembly, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to read the names of the Gold Star family members and their servicemen.
Minority Leader Neville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to introduce Pat O'Kane Trombley. If she could please stand for us. Ms. Trombley is the mother of Captain Thomas O'Kane Gramuth, U.S. Air Force. He was awarded the Bronze Star Air Medal with 1 Oak Leaf Cluster Aerial Accommodation Medal, and he was killed in action 18 July 2009 in Ghazni, Afghanistan.
Representative Humphrey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Nancy Fander, please stand. Okay. Nancy Fander, mother of Corporal Kyle W. Powell, United States Marine Corps, killed in action, Iraq, November 4th, 2006. Thank you.
Representative Liston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Pam Schaefer please stand? Members, Ms. Schaefer is the proud mother of Sergeant Andrew Mark Schaefer, Counsel of the U.S. Army. Her son, he was a Denver native. He was a MP in the Army. He had 2 deployments in Afghanistan before he was deceased, and he was stationed at Fort Carson.
Representative Carver.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Pam Stemple, would you please stand? Mother of FSC Thomas Avey, U.S. Army Ranger, beloved son, brother, and father.
Representative Everett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ms. Sampers, would you please stand? James W. Sampers, U.S. Navy, killed in action, Vietnam, September 1969 on a river patrol.
Representative Buck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mother Patricia Murnane, Father John Wolfsey. When asked if boot camp was difficult, Alex D. Wolfsey, ATN, replied, "No, it was just like football practice, except in college you could do what you wanted after practice. And problem was in college I was too tired to do anything else but crash." Alex truly loved being in the Navy, so much that it was perhaps the happiest time of his life. And although he was only 23 at the time of his passing, his many experiences while in Navy provided him what many spend a lifetime experiencing. He is missed by so many and will never be forgotten.
Representative Ransom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'm going to introduce Missy Robinson Mosher, if you can stand up. She's the mother of Sergeant Joshua James Robinson of the United States Marine Corps. He was killed in Afghanistan on August 7th, 2011. And I'm going to share just a little bit about Joshua. He was a Colorado State wrestling qualifier for 3 years while attending Overland High School in Aurora. Josh enjoyed skiing on the slopes of Colorado. He loved to go on the family hunting trip for elk and deer in the mountains, ride horseback, and camp in wall tents. He was a gifted water skier, barefoot, behind a sailboat, and the first skier of the year on Lake Pueblo on January 1st. Josh liked to fish and camp on the lakes and rivers in Colorado. He was a true outdoorsman. These talents came into play when he enlisted in the Marines in 2003. Josh did 3 tours in Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. He was known by his friends as Bug Eater in high school and Man Country in the Marines. Josh was a scout sniper in the Marines. One of the questions he was asked by a general was, "How did you track those guys?" He said, "The same way we would track an elk or a deer." Some of the men in his unit told his mother the story of how Josh had caught a fish on a paperclip, string, and a stick with a grasshopper for bait, and they couldn't believe he could actually do that. Josh was an instructor at the Marine Mountain Warfare Training Center in Bridgeport, California for 3 years. He taught high-angle sniper, mountain survival, and helped develop a man-tracking course. He rode horses, packed in with mules, skied, and fished. He taught his 2 sons to recognize different animal tracks and how to ski when they were 3 and 4 years of age. To this day, those are their favorite memories of their dad. All that knew Josh miss him dearly, especially his mom. Thank you for being here.
Representative Sane and Madam Speaker Pro Tem Danielson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a quick note, members. Thank you so much to the family members who are here, the Gold Star family members and leaders who are here today. There were a number who could not be. And so to them we say a big thank you. Please pass on our gratitude, and we hope that they'll be able to come when we do a similar resolution next year. Appreciate it.
Representative Sane.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, would you escort our Gold families over to the Senate? Thank you for your attention today.
Ms. Randall, please read the title of HJR 1027.
House Joint Resolution 1027 by Representatives Michelson, Janae, and Sias, also Senators Crowder and Finberg, concerning the declaration of April 23, 2017 through April 29, 2017 as Holocaust Awareness Week.
Representative Michelson, Janae.
Madam Speaker, I request that the resolution be read at length.
Would somebody like to move the resolution?
Oh.
Representative Sias.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move
HJR 1027 and ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Randall, please read it at length.
Whereas prejudice, bigotry, and racism have been the cause of conflict, war, and mass atrocities throughout human history. And whereas the Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators, the Nazis who came to power in Germany in January 1933 believed that Germans were racially superior and that the Jews, deemed inferior, were an alien threat to the so-called German racial community. And whereas between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its collaborators murdered 6 million of the 9 million Jews who lived throughout Europe, 1.5 million of whom were children, as well as 5 million other civilians it deemed to be inferior, including Sinti and Roma people, Poles, people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, gay men, Jehovah's Witnesses, Soviet prisoners of war, and political dissidents. And whereas Hitler used anti-Semitism as a political weapon to gain popular support, blaming Jews for all of Germany's problems, including their defeat in World War I, the economic depression, and the Bolshevik threat of communism, that Hitler's accusations were blatantly contradictory and his facts were often fabricated, made little difference. And whereas we must never forget the horrors of the Holocaust and how, by 1945, the Germans and their collaborators had killed nearly 2 out of every 3 European Jews as part of the final solution, the Nazi policy to murder the Jews of Europe. And whereas today, while we remember the heartbreaking part of human history that is the Holocaust, we specifically acknowledge the experience of the Polish Jewish community, the largest in Europe prior to the Holocaust, once the Central European home to 3.3 million Jews. By 1945, 3 million had been executed. And whereas today, while we remember the horror that was the Holocaust, we focus our attention to the passing of time and the few remaining survivors who can tell us their stories firsthand, we must acknowledge those who ensure that we never forget. And whereas never again has been the mantra of generations who survived the atrocities in Europe, with the goal being to never relive this history and to guide us to learn the basics of respect for humanity, until now we have always had firsthand eyewitnesses and survivors living in our midst. And whereas even with firsthand eyewitnesses living amongst us, there have been those who have tried to erase the history of the Holocaust, to revise the facts and deny what occurred. Now, more than ever, we must bear witness, as our children and grandchildren will be the last generations to know this story directly from those who lived through it. And whereas in Colorado, there are several organizations dedicated to the retelling of the accounts of genocide, and whereas many students in Colorado learn the history of World War II, including the Nazi genocide, and whereas the history of Colorado's Holocaust survivors is written in books and recorded in oral history projects around the country and in Israel, and whereas we recognize that among the 3 million Polish Jews and 2 million Polish Gentiles murdered during the Holocaust, there were many stories from which we can learn, including those from individuals like Paweł Frankiel, a leader during the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, Alla Gertner, who died a martyr for aiding the underground resistance, Janusz Korczak, who after many years of working with orphans in the Warsaw Ghetto refused freedom so that he could remain with his orphans while they were relocated to the Treblinka extermination camp, and many others who perished in Polish concentration camps, including Auschwitz-Birkenau, Belzec, Chełmno, Gross-Rosen, Majdanek, Polslav, Sobibor, Stutthof, and Treblinka. And whereas we gratefully acknowledge the 6,620 righteous among the nations, those who risked their lives during the Holocaust to save Jews from extermination by the Nazis, people such as Stanislaw Grochowski, Jan Karski, Tadeusz Kozabowiec, Tadeusz Pankowicz, Helena Mercelawa and Ursula Presbindowska, Oskar Schindler, Irina Sendler, Rudolf Weigel, Antonina and Jan Zabinski, and many other Poles or those working or living in Nazi-occupied Poland, whose accounts of struggle served as lessons from which we can all learn. And whereas we recognize there are the few remaining survivors of the Holocaust who exhibited a tremendous will to live and persevere despite the horrors they endured, yet can never forget the atrocities that were inflicted on them, their families, and their friends. And whereas we should never forget the terrible experiences of those who suffered and lived through the Holocaust, and we are reminded of the importance of those lessons by the resurgence of anti-Semitism around the world, pernicious Holocaust denial, and recent episodes of ethnic cleansing, genocide, terrorism, crimes against humanity, wars on civilian populations, and mass killings in so many parts of the world, including Syria, Iraq, Nigeria, Bosnia, Cambodia, Rwanda, and the Sudan. And whereas we must also recall that in the aftermath of war, Palestine, then controlled by the British, became a destination for many of the survivors in Europe, that on May 14, 1948, the State of Israel became a place of refuge for those who endured the ravages of the Holocaust, and that today Israel is a thriving democracy and close ally and friend of the United States. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 71st General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the General Assembly, proclaim the week of April 23, 2017 through April 29, 2017 as Holocaust Awareness Week, and that we declare that the people of Colorado should use these days to teach and remember the great injustices of the past and to commit to preventing such atrocities in the future.
Representative Zayas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members, please be seated. I want to say, first of all, how honored and humbled I am to be standing in front of you for this resolution. I want to thank Representative Michelson-Jeannet for her work, her teamwork on this. But it is, as I'm sure you can understand, very humbling because it's difficult to imagine how any words that you could come up with would do justice to the message and the horror of what we were talking about here. I find myself today missing, and no slight intended, Representative Bridges, but I find myself missing former Representative and current Senator, my friend Daniel Kagan, who, as those of you who have been here before will remember, would come down here and tell a wonderful story in his unique style, a story of how a man, essentially through complete risk to himself and under no obligation, actually made Daniel Kagan's existence possible by saving parents. And it's a very poignant story, and for those who haven't heard it, I would ask you, seek him out and listen to that story. All of us in one way or another have been fortunate enough to have contact and acquaintance and maybe are relatives of somebody who actually was a survivor. My wife's dad, my father-in-law, was a small 10-year-old boy, and he was actually fortunate to be able to escape from Denmark in a false-bottom boat, essentially part of an exodus to Sweden, in which a large percentage of the Jews in Denmark and Copenhagen specifically were actually saved. And he's been able to, not only tell that story to me, but to our children. Similarly, my wife's uncle, Edward Blatt, as a 14-year-old, was captured and held for 5 years in a variety of different camps. But he was separated from his family at that time, and he survived and has thrived in America. But he never saw the rest of his family again. But again, children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews have been able to hear that story directly from him. And to Representative Michelson-Jeannet's credit, who really had this, I think, very important idea, those opportunities are vanishing fast for us to have direct contact and to hear those direct stories. And so what I would ask is for each of us, as we hear the stories that will be told today, and there will be many, that we take that information and reflect a little bit on how we are going to fulfill our responsibility to bear witness going forward, how we're going to live our lives, treat others, raise our children, in order that we can play a role in preventing this from happening again. So thank you very much, and I very humbly ask for your aye vote on this.
Representative Michelson-Jeannet.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, for being here today on what is Yom HaShoah. It is the day of Holocaust remembrance around the world. This morning in Poland, a very large group of Jewish and Gentile teenagers walked arm in arm silently from the concentration camp of Auschwitz to the death camp of Birkenau. It is called the March of the Living. When I was 17 years old, I had the opportunity to participate in this trip. As a young child, I had always been very interested in the Holocaust, but my senior generation, my grandparents and great-grandparents didn't speak of it. And one day I found a book on my grandmother's bookshelf, and the title was I Am a Star. And interestingly, we talked about gold stars. There was a big gold star on the front of the book. And I read this book, and I remember growing an insatiable thirst to know and learn what happened to my people, what happened to my family. I knew that my great-grandmother had escaped from Hungary. I knew that my great-great-grandparents and uncles had left from Poland. I knew that we had escaped from Russia. I knew that we had escaped from Iran. My family had escaped from everywhere at some point in my family's history. And we talk about Israel when we talk about the Holocaust a lot. My family, a great deal of them went to Israel. Some of them as early as the 1700s. I'm a 13th generation Israeli on my mother's side. Whatever it was, the time was bringing us to escape. And when I was 17 and I heard about this trip called the March of the Living, I knew I needed to get a scholarship to go. I was living in Cincinnati, Ohio, and when I was 14 years old, we got a clogged toilet, and my father wasn't particularly handy, so he called a plumber. And the plumber shows up, and my father wears a skull cap. And the plumber says to my father, "You folk Jews?" And my father said, "Yes, we're Jewish." And he said, "Where's y'all's horns and tail?" Now, I'd never heard that before. I was 14 years old at the time and didn't know, my father spent a good deal of time trying to explain to me, where did this story come from? Where is this misunderstanding and where is this belief? So when I was 17 and I heard about this trip, I knew I had to go. I'd read every book there was to read at this point. I had learned all of my family history. There was one who got out on my grandfather's side. Everybody who was left was gone. And I had seen the beautiful pictures of the 2 daughters he had and the 6 children each of those women had. And that dead side of our family tree had started to blossom again in Israel. And I knew that our family wasn't gone, but I needed to know. And I stood under the gate, and some of you may have seen the pictures. It says, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. And it was a very cold April morning in Poland, and it was wet, and it was dreary, and it was just what you needed it to be able to stand on the ground in Auschwitz and know that your feet were connecting with actual real earth. Because I couldn't possibly believe that this was real, that this was true, that this had actually happened to my family, that all of the books that I read actually happened, until I stood on that ground and I walked the distance between Auschwitz and Birkenau. And when you approach Birkenau, you are walking the entire way along the railroad tracks. And there it is before you, the big brick edifice that those trains entered through, and nobody walked out. Not a single tear dropped from my eyes. And I couldn't understand it. I mean, I cry at Kleenex tissue commercials. Here I was at the heaviest place of my life, and I was absolutely numb. My very first job when I moved to Colorado, I was director of the Holocaust Awareness Institute. I was all of 23 years old. And I met a Holocaust survivor who's sitting in this room today. And I got to dedicate a portion of my life to making sure teachers in Colorado knew about the Holocaust and knew how to teach about it. We developed these wonderful trunks. Maybe some of your children or some of you have seen them yourselves that travel around to schools that are filled with materials to give people the access to know what the story is, to know what happened there. And I was told when I first started that our job was to teach tolerance. How about I don't like the word tolerance? I believe our job is to teach respect. We respect one another. We respect our histories. We respect our diversities. We respect where we were coming from. And through that respect, we move the needle forward on a world that we all wish to live in. Let me tell you something. There were people who were able to pass in the Holocaust. This face doesn't pass. Brown curly hair, brown eyes, the Jewish features that everybody was told that a Jew would look like. I bear them. And when I travel the world and I do anything, and I traveled even this country, I often got questions about the fact that I was Jewish. What does that mean? Where do you come from? Did you do all the things that I was told that you do? Still today, these questions abound. The story is an important story to tell, because when we come for one, we come for others. It never stops with the Jew. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for the words that you have all said to me. Several of you have said to me over the time that we have worked together as I've tried to learn beyond just what I know to be my biblical history, but to study what you study too. This is where we develop the grounds for respect. We lost so many. There are so many children that were never born. There were so many who never got to live out the life of their dreams. And the few that we have left, I urge you and encourage you to meet, to listen to their story, and to go to some of the places that we have here in Colorado where you can see the history unfold. Let us be the ones who take the responsibility and the mantle that the fact that we will never forget means that we will never again allow this to happen. Thank you.
Representative Sias.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Michelson and Janae. Just as to explain the process here this morning, what we're going to do is, just as we did with the Gold Star resolution, is to pass this, get co-sponsors so that it can go off to the Senate, and then members who wish to speak will be given the time to do that.
Would you like to move the resolution?
Madam Speaker, I would move House Joint Resolution 1027.
Thank you. The motion before us is the passage of House Joint Resolution 1027. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The resolution is passed. Representative Michelson Janae.
Madam Speaker, we ask that the morning's roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, today's roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. You know, our Colorado General Assembly considers a Holocaust remembrance resolution every year, as we very well should. But to me, this year is different. And this year is different because the year that has preceded this day and this particular resolution is different. And that is so because anti-Semitism didn't just happen in Germany in the 30s and 40s. It happened before then, and it happened after then. And it's happening today, sad to say. This year is different because in the last year or so, in our very own country, anti-Semitism has been on the rise in a way that I didn't think I would ever see in my lifetime, at least not in our country. The last year or so, journalists who are Jewish, or who maybe somebody thought was Jewish, have been targeted online with all sorts of invective and threats. That's what those triple parentheses were about on Twitter, if you noticed that. And then that sign was co-opted by those who wanted to stand up against that kind of hatred. Swastikas continue to pop up all over the country on buildings, and I read one account where a 20 by 20 foot swastika was carved into a field. somewhere in the United States. Since this January 1st, so just a few months, over 100 Jewish community institutions have been targeted with nearly 150 different bomb threats all over the country. And in what I find to be a really sick twist, a number of those threats have been phoned in against offices of the Anti-Defamation League itself, one of the leading institutions dedicated to combating anti-Semitism. So, usually when I'm trying to make a point, I talk about numbers or things like that, and I actually had a map. I'm not going to ask that it be displayed of the phenomenon I just described, but my colleague from Adams County spoke personally, and I'm going to do the same for just a minute. I've been mostly fortunate in my life. As an Anglo person, I haven't faced discrimination because of the color of my skin. As a straight person, I haven't faced discrimination because of who I love. And as a man, I haven't faced discrimination because of my gender. And as a person of Jewish ancestry, I've been fortunate mostly, although there have been a few exceptions that I will remember for a long time, to have gone through my life without facing discrimination because of what somebody thinks they know about me or my family, because of the religion of my ancestors or because of my name. But I have to be honest that in the last year or so, I haven't been quite as certain that I can continue to take that for granted because of what has been going on in our country in the last year or so with anti-Semitism on the rise. And because now, for the first time in my life, I'm a public figure and I'm a little bit more visible. But I think much more importantly than that, there are a lot of other people in our state and in our country who are probably also a lot less certain than they deserve to be because of the religion of their ancestors and because of their name. And I think that's quite unfortunate. So the saying that the pen is mightier than the sword goes back to about 1839 as far as I can tell. And I think that saying is still very true today. But I think it's important to remember that the pen, just like the sword, cuts both ways. The pen and the text message and the Facebook post and the tweet and the blog can be used to call out for justice at home, or they can bring down oppressive regimes abroad. But the pen and the text message and the Facebook post and the tweet and the blog can also demonize and otherize and dehumanize and degrade. So the Hebrew word for Holocaust or Shoah translates to catastrophe, and I think that if we are going to learn anything from the catastrophe that we're talking about here, that was the systematic extermination of 6 million Jewish people and 6 million other human beings, we need to learn that lesson. We need to learn and to remember that the pen, just like the sword, cuts both ways. And I think, moreover, it's important to bear in mind that on the one hand, we say the pen is mightier than the sword, but I think history teaches us that the pen also motivates the sword and the angry epithet and the clenched fist and the bullet and the bomb. The pen motivates those things. One of our colleagues likes to remind us that when we consider a resolution, we should not simply vote on it and approve it on to the other chamber, but we need to do something about it. And I think he's right. Especially for this resolution, especially for this subject. And here I think we can do something every single day. When we see or hear anti-Semitism in our state, in our country, speak out, call it out, shut it down. When we see or hear any other attempt to demonize and otherize and dehumanize and degrade, speak out, call it out, shut it down. Martin Niemöller, who was a Protestant pastor, by the way, spent 7 years in concentration camps because he dared to speak out against the Third Reich. Somehow he survived. And he wrote these words: "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me. There was no one left to speak out for me." I think if we are to honor the memory of the catastrophe, we have to remember the lesson embodied in those words. Thank you.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem, and thank you to our resolution sponsors. And I can't reiterate any more than what Representative Saya said about Representative and now Senator Kagan's personal experience with his family. And so I'm just going to talk about my personal experience. I only do this every couple of years because, you know, you get to hear the same story and it starts to lose its meaning. But I was struck by some words that former Minority Leader Waller said a few years ago, where he said he visited the Holocaust Memorial in Israel, and he said, I can't imagine being in a position where I'm standing in front of a train and I've got soldiers looking at me and my family, men over here, women over here, families being torn apart. My family story is a little different because, well, certainly I have that portion of my family tree that will never grow. I also have my mother's father, whose family came here in part because of anti-Semitism at the beginning of the 20th century, and he later became a staff sergeant in the military and was ultimately in charge of Nazi POWs. So now he was in a position of power. Now, my grandfather looked a little different than me. He could only be best described as a short Viking. Much stockier than me and ran sprint, and I can't imagine how he did the pole vault, but he did that too. And blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And spoke German. I spoke German. And so when it came to be him that was in charge, him that was giving the directions to the very exterminators of his and our people, the first thing he would do as they lined up in front of him in perfect German, he would say, Ich bin ein Jude. I'm a Jew. And they'd all look at him and go, 999. Can't be true. This short Viking, he can't be Jewish. Because of the lies and the fear that was spread through political discord, an entire society was brainwashed into thinking that my grandfather could never be Jewish. The person in charge, their freedom, their food, their drink, their exercise and recreation, a short Viking? 9, impossible. And so instead of taking this opportunity to show retribution, he started to teach them. 16, 17, 18-year-old Nazi youth that joined up in the Nazi movement to achieve not only military but political goals and ultimately genocide, were now having cakes for their birthday baked for them by a Jew. Hearts and minds change. Hearts and minds change when you take the time, when you're in a position of power. An opportunity to educate and show compassion instead of retribution. And also a lack of fear that, you know what, he could have hidden his own Jewish identity a lot more easily than I could have, because you never know what happens on a POW prison yard. There might have been an opportunity for retribution from the other side, from those very own Nazi soldiers that thought they could get one more in. But instead they stood up and they apologized. After the initial shock, they said, oh, we had no idea, we're so sorry, we didn't know that this was what we were doing. So now we're all in a position of power. We are all given the responsibility to look into the eyes of the people that would seek to either eliminate our community or the LGBT community, as is being done in Chechnya right now, or any other community of color, disability community. We talk about this every day. But now we're given that opportunity, and instead of demonizing those that would seek to destroy us, maybe we can educate them. Maybe we can help them identify with who they really are and who we really are. Because ultimately, none of us will hopefully be in that situation of standing in front of a bunch of soldiers in a POW camp identifying ourselves as the community that genocide was facing. But you never know. And when we say never forget, that's too passive for me. I want you to always remember. Always remember not only of this incident of the 6 million Jews that were killed and the 2 million Catholics that were killed, but the incidents that are still happening today. And that act of remembrance means standing up. Standing up, whether it is here in the well, in our community, on Facebook and Twitter. It is so easy to stand aside and then ask ourselves when it's too late, how did we get here? But maybe it starts with making a cake for someone. So for my mother's father, Edwin Peckler, thank you for teaching me how to reach out to the other side and how to maybe prevent the next genocide just by listening, standing up, and saying, Ich bin ein Jude.
Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem, and I rise in very strong support for this House Joint Resolution 1027, and thank you to the sponsors for doing a great job on pulling it together. And so members, this is something I'm just kind of getting goosebumps from hearing from some of the members and sort of thinking about those who perished, but also the beauty of those who have survived and folks like, and I know you're going to mention Paula Berger and her family who are here today, who I've gotten to know over the years. And so if you're Jewish, you pretty much know someone in your family, most likely, who had perished. And in my family, it is my great-grandmother who lived in Warsaw, and much of her family who perished at the hands of the Nazis and of hate and ignorance during the war. But the war, as pretty much all wars, really in a lot of ways never end. And part of that is it lives on in the memories of the survivors, it lives on in the children of the survivors and their children. It should live on in our classrooms in the sense of we need to learn about it, the teachers need to teach, hopefully effectively, about it. But also the research is being done. There's still research to do. There are troves and troves of files in state archives and libraries that need to be gone through. And then there is a priest, a French priest named Patrick Desbois, who is racing against time, literally racing with his team through Eastern Europe. And he is going from little shtetl, little town to town to town. Some of them barely have streets and roads. And he knocks on the doors of the oldest people in the town, and the very first thing when they open the door is, where are they? Where are the graves from the war? And many times they say, what took you so long? Because under the Soviet times, they didn't talk about it. It wasn't discussed. So they don't ask, did you participate? They're not asking for that personal story necessarily. They're saying, where are they so we can document it? Hurry up, put it on GPS, on a map, and go to the next one, to the next town. Because in Eastern Europe, many of those massacres, in fact, almost all of them, were by bullet. They used to line up the Jewish people at ravines and mow them down with machine guns, and obviously bury them. And we need to make sure that we race against time and support people like the priest, Patrick Desbois,
who came to Denver recently and say, we have to help you find them. And sometimes he'll do a little digging and he'll find a wedding ring or some other artifact that reminds us that they too had lives and happiness and sadness. And so when we say we must remember them, we must remember all about them, not just how they died, but who they were, and include their lives in our lives as we go about our day. Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem.
Representative Pabon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I rise in strong support of HJR 1027. I had the honor and privilege of visiting my ancestry, the land of Israel, a couple years ago. And I say that not because I definitively know I have Jewish roots, but I know that my faith, current faith, Catholicism, sits on Judaism, and so they're completely intertwined. And I had the opportunity to learn more about that as I visited Israel, and the phenomenal debt of gratitude I think we as Catholics owe to the Jewish faith for creating what we are today. But in addition to that, I had an opportunity to look at the history of Israel and, of course, the Holocaust, and visited Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum. And it was one of those life-changing experiences to which, to this day, it's difficult for me, frankly, to sit in or listen to this memorial because of the horrific stories and scenes that museum brought forth to me in a way that I will forever change me. And I take this opportunity to just let you know one observation that I had that I think applies not just to how we remember our history, how we think about the Holocaust, or how we look at the world today. It is the Children's Memorial at Yad Vashem, which is a very dark space when you first walk in, and there's a voice overheard announcing each child that was lost during the Holocaust. And you enter into this dark room, and that's the way they have it set up, because it's darkness. And over the course of time, as your eyes adjust, you realize that there's a candle in the middle of the room, and your eyes get drawn to that light. And then you notice that there's more than one candle as your eyes adjust even more. And the room starts to light up naturally as your eyes become acclimated to the light. But you realize that it's not what turns out to be, it looks like hundreds, if not thousands of candles of light that are illuminating the room. It's not that at all. It's mirrors that are reflecting upon each other that double and quadruple that light instantaneously. So at the end of the day, it's only a few candles of light that are being reflected by these mirrors that create the whole room, by the time you're done walking through the memorial, to be entirely lit up. And I thought it was a perfect metaphor to what we do and what our role is, which changes from time to time. Many times people look at us to be the light, to spread and to share and to burn, whether that's representing our constituents' calling, whether it's to remember the Holocaust, no matter what it is. We're called on to be bright lights. But sometimes that cause can be difficult and arduous to carry on. And sometimes we feel our light to be flickering out and diminishing. But what I think we forget is that you don't have to be the light. You can be the mirror that reflects the light. You simply have to be a reflection of what you see and what you remember and what takes place. And that's just as powerful, if not more powerful, than being that singular source of light. So having that experience at Yad Vashem and seeing that Children's Memorial, which impacted and changed the way I think about the world, not only as it relates to the Holocaust, but what each of our roles are in this chamber, in this world, to make it a better place. Thank you.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem, and thank you to Representative Michelson-Jenet and Representative Sias for bringing this resolution. In years past, I've read the quote that Representative Weissman described from Martin Niemöller, but this past year, I got a Christmas card from a priest who lives near me, which I think describes the same point that Martin Niemöller was making, but in a more contemporary fashion. When they shot black youth, I didn't speak out because it wasn't my neighborhood. When they refused entry to refugees, I didn't speak out because I had a home. When they tortured people, I didn't speak out because I was afraid I'd be called a terrorist sympathizer. When they deported immigrants, I didn't speak out because I was a citizen. When they discriminated against LGBTQ people, I didn't speak out because my relationship was already recognized. When they came for those who had spoken out, I still didn't speak out. And when they came for me, and by that time, there was no one left to speak out. I stand in support of this resolution, and I hope to be the mirror to reflect the power of it. Thank you.
Representative Pedersen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I rise in support of this resolution. I'm standing up for my new family. You all know, most of you know Ian Silveri. He is my fiance, and his family is Jewish. I had the opportunity to meet his mom, or his grandma, before she passed away, Nana. And I was very excited that she accepted me even though I was not Jewish. And she said, you know, I don't have much time left, you need to get married. And every time she called, she asked when the wedding was. And we reminded her that we work in politics and we have no time or money. And so every time she would call, she would always ask when we were getting married. And we're finally getting married this summer, and we unfortunately lost Nana before that, which I have regret about. But I have regret that mostly that she passed away before I went to Israel. I had the opportunity to go with Jewish Colorado for the public missions trip with Representative Lawrence, and it gave a deeper understanding for what they went through. His grandparents were Holocaust survivors. They were born in Poland. They were in the ghetto in Lodz, Poland. And they were taken to Auschwitz. And as you know, they were separated by female and male. And so they didn't actually meet when they were there, but they were both liberated, and they lost most of their family. And they actually met when they were in Sweden, where they moved to New York to eventually start a family here. And so knowing their story is impactful, but also going to Yad Vashem, where you get to really walk through these experiences and what happened, I thought just brought an even deeper meaning and appreciation. And as Representative Pabon was talking about, a couple of the exhibits that really stuck out for me was the one that was honoring the 1.5 million children that were killed during the Holocaust, and also one that showed a picture in the stories of the boats that showed up with refugees on our shores of people who were fleeing, who were Jewish, and begging for a place to come where they were safe. And it was during the beginning of the discussion over what we were going to do with Syrian refugees, and I thought that it was incredibly not only important to learn from the mistakes that we've made, but as many have talked about today, what are we going to do to make sure we don't continue to make those mistakes? And so visiting Israel, there was also another moment that was very impactful when I was standing on the Syrian and Israeli border, where you could actually look over and see where ISIS, the previous week, there were bombs going off. I mean, it was just right over the horizon to see what was going on just beyond their borders. And so I just want to thank the sponsors for bringing this resolution to reflect on the past, but also making sure that we're reflecting on today. Thank you.
Representative Janal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem, and I rise in strong support for SJR 1027. And I want to thank the sponsors, Representative Michelson Janae and Representative Sias, for bringing this forward. And as we should every single year. A few years ago, I traveled to Poland. That's where my father's side of the family is from. In particular, the city of Krakow. The city of Krakow, if anyone's been there, is a wonderfully happy city with music and Mozart and paintings, and just the people are happy there. At least it appeared to be when I was traveling through it. And I was very proud because I realized where part of my heritage came from and the deep heritage that we had. I also had many friends growing up through kindergarten, through high school in New Hampshire that were Jewish. But they never talked about what happened, and that was in the early 60s. We never talked about it. There was something different about them. They practiced a different religion, and I was brought up Protestant, and they were brought up Jewish. But I never really knew the difference. And then I converted to Judaism. I married my now ex-husband, and that was something he wanted. And so I worked with a rabbi for about 9 months and converted to Judaism. And I'm very proud of what I did. The heritage and what Judaism means is really important to me, as I know it is all the Jews and all the other people ought to really understand this a little bit better. And I know a lot of us don't, what the differences are. When I was married, and even before then, I saw documentaries on TV of the atrocities of the Holocaust, and I saw my husband crying at the time, and to the point where he had to turn off the television set. And I couldn't understand until I realized that he had lost so many of his family in the Holocaust. And then I look back on my own family and I wonder as well. Being Poles, being from Krakow and Warsaw, but mainly Krakow, my grandparents immigrated to the United States, and what were they really escaping? It wasn't talked about very much. And I wish I had asked more questions. I wish I could have gotten more answers when I did ask questions, but I didn't. So I took a very sobering trip because outside of Krakow, as was mentioned, about 40 or 50 miles is Auschwitz and Birkenau. And I really wasn't prepared for what I was going to see. I'd heard from many people about the atrocities. I'd heard about Auschwitz and Birkenau. I've seen pictures, but seeing it firsthand sent chills down my spine and into my soul. And I remember the railroad tracks as we first rode in, and I knew those tracks led to nowhere. I could see it. The last stop for millions of people. Millions of beautiful, innocent people. And I remember the large iron sign that Representative Michelson Janae interpreted in German And in English, translated, it means work makes you free. And in reality, as you go through Auschwitz, you realize that it meant that torture and death was the only way to be free. And I still can't forget the piles of human hair, the piles of gold teeth, of eyeglasses, of shoes, of baby shoes that were confiscated. And worst of all, the piles of canisters of cyanide pellets, empty canisters of cyanide pellets that were there, the thousands of them. And the feeling I had when I walked into the showers and saw the crematory ovens where millions were burned, it was beyond words. I just was so touched, and it was something that I will never forget. But beyond that were the ponds. They had actually made ponds where they took the ashes from the ovens. And this was about 6 or 7 years ago that I was there. And those ponds are still gray from the ashes that were dumped in them. And to this day, and for the rest of my life, I can never forget, nor will I ever forget, and the world must never forget what happened in the Holocaust and what happened to 6 million Jews. I stand in strong support.
Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. 6 million people. Think of the enormity of that. Yet I think sometimes it's easy for us to think about the number and not remember the individual lives that were there. So I want to share a quote from Mother Teresa, because I think it's a great reminder for us about the individual nature of this tragedy. And she said, "If I look at the mass, I will never act." If you think about what led to the Holocaust, and today is the commemoration of Genocide Remembrance Day, because before the Holocaust, there was an Armenian genocide, and we'll have the opportunity to commemorate that later this week. But because the world failed to act, because the world failed to call out the Ottoman Empire for the slaughter of 1.5 million Armenians, Hitler was encouraged to carry out his plan. This is the price. This is the price for our failure to act. If we don't remember what causes genocide, if we don't learn about the root causes, if we don't share those stories, if we don't educate our children, we are doomed to repeat history. Representative Sias, Representative Michelson-Jeannet, thank you very much for bringing this resolution. Members, I think Representative Singer said it very, very well today. Yes, we must always remember, but above all else, we are called to act. Thank you.
Representative Herod.
Thank you. Members, I too rise in strong support of this resolution. As a daughter of a military soldier born in Nuremberg and the granddaughter of a veteran, war veteran, I've always been very fascinated as a child about what happened during this time period, and have always thought about the American sacrifice that happened during this time. But it wasn't until about 2 years ago when I went out on an exchange with the German Marshall Fellowship to Europe that I really understood the true significance and the true heartbreak of the Holocaust. I will always remember, whether it was visiting Amsterdam or the Danube or Berlin, how struck I was by the shoes, right? The shoes that were on the Danube, or the shoes that were piled up and stockpiled, because shoes were worth more than human life. Shoes were worth more than human life. I remember being on the Danube and seeing shoes lined up in a memorial, and the little tiny ones, and thinking about and hearing about the over 3,000 people who were shot and pushed into the Danube River, but asked to leave their shoes first. The little ones who were asked to take off their shoes and strapped to their parents and pushed into the Danube. This is how we treated people, right? I will never forget that. And thinking about today and the many people, some who are here today, who are working and fighting to make sure that our young people understand that we are going to live in a place that is free from hate, starting with the young people, telling our young folks that they are valued and that they are part of this change. It's remarkable. So 2 years ago today, about this time actually, I stood in Anne Frank's, in the home of Anne Frank, and thought of her life and the sacrifice that she made and how she tried to live on knowing that her family members were being slaughtered. And there's a statue for her, and on there is a quote that says, "All of her would-haves are our possibilities." All of her would-haves are our possibilities. Members, we have the option right now and the possibility to work with so many folks to build a world that is free from hate. I'll join them, and I know you will too. So I do rise in strong support of this resolution. Thank you for bringing this forward.
Representative Winter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I rise in support of House Joint Resolution 1027, and thank you to our sponsors for doing this today. My middle name is Kirstena, and it's hard to spell and it's hard to say. It's Kjersteina. But it's my great-grandmother's name, and she was Danish. And her claim to fame was she was one of the Danish people that organized Danish people to wear gold stars on their shoulder, whether they were Jewish or not, so that you couldn't identify. And my mom would teach me about her, and she'd teach us about the Holocaust and say, it wasn't a couple of bad people in a room. It was the good people that looked the other way that allowed this to happen. And you have the fire in you, and you have the courage in you to not be one of those good people that look the other way. And we've heard a lot today about how tolerance isn't enough, remembrance isn't enough, but we must remember every day to take action. So please take the action you need to, and don't be one of those good people that look the other way.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. You know, I've never come down to speak on Holocaust Awareness Day because I've wanted to sit at my chair and just listen to the stories about people's life experiences, particularly Representative Kagan, who always gave a very moving tribute, recounting his own family history as it relates to that era of time. And now I have the privilege of listening to Representative Michelson-Jeannet. And thank you very much for sharing your story. I really appreciate that. It's human history just unfolding itself in front of this body. Human history is interesting. It's tragic, and it's beautiful, and it's horrifying, and it's brutal. and it's supposed to teach us lessons. But let me tell you what human history is not. Human history is not original. And human history is very vain. And I say it's unoriginal and it's vain because history repeats itself. And it tells you it's going to repeat itself. And it's so vain that it's right out there in the open for us to see if indeed we have learned the lessons of the past. And we haven't. Representative Wiss talked about the Armenian genocide. What about the Spanish Inquisitions that led to genocide then? What about what happened with the American Indian population here, the American genocide? What about what's happened throughout the rest of the world and every single part to people who have suffered genocide, including what's happening today? Human history is not original, and it is very vain. We talk about never forgetting. How can we ever forget when it's happening right now? Last year, I sat down with members of the Jewish community to learn a little bit more about what happened in the 1920s and 30s with the rise of Nazi Germany, to see what similarities there were from then to today. And there are a lot of similarities. We see the rise in Nazism. We see the rise in hate crimes. We see the rise in groups that hate fellow human beings. We see language that's being used that is not original in human history. That language of making another being, human being, less than another person. Because that's when you see a Holocaust start to rise, is when people see others as less than human beings. And we're seeing that happen right now. We see people smearing literally crap on other people's homes who are non-white, such as what happened in Colorado Springs last year to an Indian family. We see the bombings of churches and synagogues, just much the same as we saw in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s with black churches. We see people actually walking into graveyards to defile gravestones. What kind of debased human being do you have to be to go into a graveyard to desecrate dead people? If they're willing to do that, what are they willing to do with people who are living? Human history is unoriginal and it is vain. When I sat down with the community last year and said, tell me, I want to know. I don't want to be that politician who people talk about 20, 30, 40 years from now and say, did they do anything to stop the rise in hatred? While they sat there and talked about never forget, and we should act, that they did nothing to stop a rise in hatred. And out of that, out of working with the wonderful groups like ADL, legislation was born to at least address what was not addressed back in the 1920s and 30s. To say that we are doing something to help out our communities, that we recognize that there are Jewish, non-Jewish, Muslim, immigrant, LGBTQ communities who are under attack now. That there's an American Indian population that's under attack now. And we recognize that human history is not original and human history is vain, and we need to do something now because we just can't sit here and say, never forget, and let it continue going. As Representative Wilson is always keen to say, what are we going to do next? And I've heard his words these past 5 years, and I've learned an awful lot from it. What are we going to do next? The next thing that we need to do is to coalesce with one another, to stop this rise that we see happening. You can't put your head in the sands with it, because no matter how much you keep your head in the sand, it's not going to turn into glass. The rest of the world is going to move on without you, and we're going to see hatred stomp all over people. And we can't have that. We just can't. The stories of Michelson, Janae, and Kagan, Rosenthal, Singer, so many others, that should weigh heavily on our hearts, and that should teach us a lesson that with this vain history, this unoriginal history, we can do something different, which is to break a cycle and start a new history all over again of being supportive of one another. Representative Sayas, Representative Michelson, Janae, I love you guys. And I love this resolution because it's a really deep reminder of where we've come from. And it should also serve as an example of where we should be going. I stand in support of HJR 1027.
Mr. Minority Leader Neville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Members, this was quoted, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." That was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Someone who had the courage of his convictions to fight what he saw was wrong. I think we can learn a lot from someone like that. You know, in history, we do have a lot to learn about it. Years before that, a famous quote was, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." That was Edmund Burke. He said that years before. We do need to learn from history. I, for one, will pledge to have the courage of my convictions that if something happens bad or this horrendous again, that I will stand up. I hope that I can have the courage that men like Dietrich Bonhoeffer had during great times, or during times of great injustice. I also think it's important that we don't forget, that we do pass on this. I, for one, will be making sure that I instill in my kids the importance of knowing about atrocities like these, and to make sure that they don't think that this is just some sort of fake made-up story, that this really happened. 6 million people. We need to make sure that our children, and then hopefully their children someday, carry on these stories so that we don't forget, and so that we are reminded to, first off, be good, second off, to act in the face of evil. So thank you, too, for bringing this resolution. Representative Michelson, Janae, thank you for your work on the curriculum and the schools so that our children are left with these stories and that we don't forget as a society. I urge support for this resolution.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I wasn't going to come down here, but since a couple of my colleagues called me out, I figured I probably ought to. Thank you, representatives, for bringing this resolution. I, too, love Representative Michelson Janae and her faith. She's different than I am. And I really appreciate the fact that she comes to the Bible study and she can pronounce those Hebrew words. And she really knows what they mean. And I just have to look down in the bottom and look at the footnotes and then the sides and try to figure out what they are and what they mean and so forth. And she just rolls them right off. And that's pretty amazing to me. So the challenge is what now? And
This is the thing that really upsets me about this body, folks. I'm not a politician. Never have been, never will be. I had to deal with Christie. If I ever turn into one, we're going home. So what now? It's easy to point our fingers at the people. It's easy to point our fingers at the ones who are responsible for this. And to stand and lecture and say, you know, it's wrong that they did this and so forth. So what now? What now? I think we're guilty of what we're talking about today, on this floor, across this blasted aisle, the way we treat each other. We get caught up in this political process, and we forget that there's people here. I love you to death. Probably not going to vote with you on some of those issues. That's just the way it is. And I love people. Some people more than others. That's just the way we are. But folks, if we can't love one another, we cannot do our job here. That's the message of what we're talking about. What's the answer? It's in the Bible. Two things. Love God, love your neighbor. Thank you.
Representative Michelson Janae.
I'm going to give some short final words, but before we do, there are some very important people in this chamber that I'd like to introduce. Will you start? If you'll start at the top, have the list.
And thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. We have several guests here who we want to acknowledge and to thank. First of all, from JCRC, from the Jewish Community Relations Council, we have Janet Sherman, Director. Please, thank you, Janet. Ben Lusher, Chair. Hi, Ben. And we have three board members: Estelle Meskin, Marcia Helfand, and Patty Jo Strelzer.
And we have also with us from the ADL, Scott Levin, Jeremy Shaver, Sue Parker Gerson, Jim Kurtz-Phelan, Sherry Rubin, and Linda Schatz. And we also have with us Frida Micklin, who's from Green Valley, not Green Valley Ranch. I wrote GV, Greenwood Village, Greenwood Village City Councilor, Frida Micklin, her mother, Holocaust survivor Paula Berger, two members of Hadassah who are also my mentors, Norma Sirota and Ann Martine. And we had with us earlier Doctors David Schneer and Greg Drinkwater. Can we please welcome them to the chamber, members? I'm going to leave you with a little bit of Hebrew. Chana Senesh, look her up, wrote of the Holocaust a song, Eli, Eli. I'm just going to briefly share it with you. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer li olam, hachol ve'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, ve'rak hashamayim, tfilat hadam, hachol ve'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, ve'rak hashamayim, tfilat Adam. O Lord, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. Let's take these words and let's do what we need to do. Thank you.
Representative Rosenthal.
Wow, that was so beautiful. Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I do have another introduction for former State Representative Dorothy Gottlieb, who also served in this body and whose family also perished in the Holocaust, and we'd like to remember them, and we'd like to thank Dorothy for being here today.
Welcome, honored guests, and thank you for your service to the organizations you represent. Thanks to the survivors who are here, elected officials. We really appreciate you being here today. And members, thanks for all of your comments. Members, we are to announcements and introductions. Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Members, tomorrow morning's appropriations, you can see the list on page 9 of today's calendar. I'm adding 2 bills to the calendar, House Bill 1321 and House Bill 1326. And so if that is your bill, be sure you're there. And if your bill is on the list, be sure you're there. And if you're a member of appropriations, be sure you're there at 8:30 LSBA tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Representative Landgraf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Members, Wednesday, April 26th is the last Behavioral Health Caucus. We will have Senator Sherry John talking about efforts in legislature, Daniel Darding, Signal Behavior Health, a budget overview, and there will be a lot of people in attendance. So please be there. It's upstairs in 357, and there will be lunch, I believe. Thank you.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Folks, on your desk is the handout from Capitol Commission. Bible study tomorrow morning, room 109, downstairs in the basement. There's lots of coffee, orange juice, and donuts. 7:15. Thank you.
Representative Janal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Members of the Health Insurance and Environment Committee, just listen up, please. Tomorrow, Tuesday, upon adjournment, we do not have any bills, so you have tomorrow morning free after adjournment. I'll announce this again tomorrow morning. Thanks.
Representative Arndt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is no House Ag today. I think everybody knows that. Just a reminder, no House Ag today. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements or introductions? Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow, Tuesday, April
25th.
25th.
Seeing no objection, the balance of the calendar will be laid over at the Assistant Majority Leader's request. Representative Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I move the House stand in recess until 1:30 today.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess until 1:30 today.